This is Industry Relations, a podcast at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson. In today's tough real estate market, keeping buyers motivated and loyal is key. Now is the time to leverage the power of One Home by CoreLogic and the best-in-class data and client collaboration experience it brings. Seamlessly integrated into Matrix, One Home delivers unbeatable engagement and one of the highest customer satisfaction scores amongst the top 10 national real estate portals. More impressively, One Home leads the pack by keeping users coming back with the highest repeat visits. With One Home's invite-only access, agents can provide their clients a truly exceptional experience. Don't forget to remind your MLS members to try this great value-added benefit. If your MLS hasn't added One Home yet, please reach out to your CoreLogic rep. Thanks again to CoreLogic for sponsoring the Industry Relations podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Industry Relations with Rob and Greg. This is your host, the notorious Rob, and as always, my unbelievable, amazing co-host, the fabulous Greg Robertson. Roar!
Oh,
you just
Hola,
put
Rob.
on the best conference of the year.
Well, I think it was the first conference of the year, so it's pretty easy to do that, right? I've
second,
got this one window.
Inman.
Okay,
Inman,
yeah. Okay, no, well.
I don't know. I didn't go to Inman, so maybe Inman was amazing, but I'm pretty sure yours was the best conference of the year.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. I'm still recovering, so yeah. It was just Wednesday, right? We're recording on Friday, so we had one day of getting back in, getting some sleep.
Yep. So we do need to apologize for missing a week because of the event and other things going on.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys.
So so you're fully recovered or you're not recovered?
I'm not recovered, man.
Did you go hard in the last night?
You know, honestly, I tried not to go hard any of the nights, right? But you know, it's hard to leave that lobby bar, right?
Yeah,
it's hard to kind of, not whatever. So
yeah.
And then I had, I brought back the industry update, and
it was awesome.
I only went into one. I only had two jokes, I think, on Monday.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and then I had the welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like, it's how it is. It's like I did write some stuff and outline, but then I had to write them all down, and then kind of like when I gave presentations to my kids and my
it was awesome. I hope you recorded that.
Yeah, which one or just
the industry update segment?
Yes, Frances Wiseman. She was in the audience and she did record it, and then I'm going to and dude, I think we have an audio recording of your presentation that we could add your slides to if you're game.
I think what I'm going to do is probably do a presentation,
right,
for my VIP audience. That's something that I tend to do. But we can certainly talk about.
Well, I have to check. We have an audio. We have the audio. I think I asked them to record the audio for that particular one because I thought we might use it here or somewhere else.
Sure.
We didn't record anything else officially because at the same time you wanted to kind of be somewhat of a safe space. I mean, everybody.
For sure.
I got people ask me about Wurzer's presentation, Curt's presentation.
Yep. My presentation,
Brian,
I've already gotten one
presentation.
request. I said, no
Brian's,
problem. Happy to share it.
Yeah. So if they actually recorded it, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about it at a high level. So this was the first event that you ran. Obviously, you've gone to so many conferences, man. You're one of the veterans of the circuit. What's it like putting on your own conference, like major conference like this?
Yeah, I mean, and again, this was completely Amy and Chris's idea. Amy came from Clarity, and then they got acquired by CoreLogic, right? And Chris is at CoreLogic, and Amy and Chris used to work together there. And then when CoreLogic got bought by Stone Point, which is who bought Lone Wolf, who bought my company, they left and started their own consulting company called Presta Team.
Yep.
And I think it was and at that time. Once CoreLogic took over the conference, they then moved it from the Scottsdale Plaza.
Right.
And they've been, honestly, been doing a great job. I mean, if you go back and read my Vendor Alley post, I've enjoyed what they've done, and they try to keep that kind of an independent vibe to it.
In fact, that's coming up in like 3 weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, it's 3 weeks from now, I think. But they had kind of just this idea that the germination idea was like, as it's not like the greatest hotel in the world, the Scottsdale Plaza, but it does have a bit of nostalgia for everybody.
Yeah.
And they thought if they ever did a little conference again, might be the place. And then they approached me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to kind of partner on this?"
Yeah.
And I was a little bit, I don't know, maybe. And then, I then started to get some ideas, and then we started to flow from there, right? I mean, my biggest thing was like, I hate that it came out this way, but it's, as a competition with, CoreLogic's thing, right. And let's own it. I mean, we're doing it at the old Clarity Place, so there is something like that. But I mean, I hope there's room for both of us.
I don't know. 3 weeks back to back is awfully tight.
Well, look at this. I mean,
the same audience.
Look what happens in the fall. Same thing happens in the fall with all the ones.
That's true. Yeah.
So I mean, we'll see what happens. But we had a great time, and everybody says Greg and what I mean, Sonny helped me out with this. I had a lot of people,
but still, man, you got a great. That was just really, really well done.
We had a good time.
Best speakers in the industry.
Yeah. I wanted to do that. In my head, I wanted storytellers like yourself and Curt Beardsley and Michael Wurzer and Brian Boero and then mix that in with some kind of industry stuff that people wanted to talk about, which is, structuring your MLS.
Right.
What is an MLS worth? I mean, those kind of things. And then, and then the timing of it, I think, when I talked to Sonny about like how we should time this, and having you on the first day was perfect because you dropped some bombs in there for sure. And that became fodder for our conversations at the reception and then lobby bar later. Yeah. So it was a good time.
You have to tell me a little about that when we delve into some of the content. But I mean, look, so this is unsolicited advice, worth exactly what you paid for it, which is right. But given that it was you, Chris, and Amy sort of putting on the event, and you guys are three of the most respected minds in the MLS
Well, there's, again, Stacy and Ohan and Dan,
Stacey
too.
Right.
Yeah, Stacy for sure.
I do think it would have been cool if the opening presentation, and it was, by the way, it was great that you had Brian Kaplan do the opening, which was awesome. Yeah. We obviously interviewed him on this podcast, and, we're both big supporters of at least what he wants to accomplish, which is affordable housing.
Right.
I'm a big fan of deregulation because I'm an anarchist, but, others probably not as much. Still, it was great to have that be the opening. But having said that, the next one you guys do, consider maybe one of the three of you or someone from the team kind of give the opening to set the agenda. Because I'm like, a lot of times I was sitting up there, I was listening and thinking, I wonder what Greg's position is. I wonder what Chris's position is. I wonder what Amy's position is. And I know you guys did some panel presentations, right? But it's not the same as like a keynote. I feel like the keynote should come from one of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think where I started out with was just on the theme, the name of the show, which is Reset. Sure. I mean, I reached into that old kind of Zen saying, which is, a beginner's mind sees more possibilities. Many possibilities, and a expert's mind sees few. And I wanted everybody to reset their mind after this last year or 2 years. Yeah. And let's go into that, right? So it's a very, very high level as far as going into each one of ours, like, what our opinions are on each one of the subject. I don't know how we would accomplish that, right? So
I don't know. Do like a free consulting, presentation. In any event, all right. So let's just go through highs and lows. Like, what's your favorite part of the presentation? What's your least favorite?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta say, I mean, it was just I hadn't seen Michael Wurzer give a presentation. I've always enjoyed his writings, as he talked about on stage. Yeah. Brian Boero, always a great storyteller.
Always.
He even had a Prince reference up there, which he he gave me the shout out on, which I thought was great. Yeah. Of course, Curt Beardsley, he bring it. I mean, he's just got such this vibe, and like
he's
yours.
A preacher.
Yeah, he's like a preacher kind of vibe, right? Which I think his parents were actually missionaries, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
And then of course you, right? So, And, you weren't, I think you just lobbed them all to everybody and didn't really single some people out. Although, I know there were some people that were upset, but whatever.
Who was upset?
Yeah,
Other than Troy, which was my favorite part of the conference.
But no, I knew what speakers I wanted there, and they were gracious enough to say yes. And then Brian to start it off with, as far as with Professor Brian Kaplan, was good. No, I mean all of it. I don't know if a favorite. I did like the optimism of Michael Wurzer's thing of like, and then Stacy Wood came out later from Giant Steps and said, "All right, everybody, let's say it again. It's a great time to be an MLS." Right? Such a counter narrative to everything, but really, I really appreciate the optimism that he was coming from. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. All right, what's your least favorite?
My least favorite, probably. I'm not the biggest data nerd, right? But I know it's so important to a lot of different things. So like listening to a lot of the discussions on data wasn't great. I loved sitting down though with Bob Hale. We did a little tribute for Bob Hale. That was fun with me and Chris.
Yeah, that was your least favorite?
No, that was I did like that, I said. The other one was, I guess anything, the data stuff is never really, to me, like I'm just not that...
not that interesting.
Not that kind of data nerd. But I mean, this is an MLS conference. You have to talk about data, so yeah.
Right. I think my favorite was Troy. Just interrupting.
Well, he did it.
I'll give the audience a little context.
It was really funny. I mean, he did.
It was hilarious.
It was hilarious. Yeah.
And I wasn't. I thought it was great. That's why I said it's my favorite. So for the audience, the context is during the event, like Greg mentioned, there was a very large discussion around data, MLS data strategy, the value of data, et cetera, and the guys made all these great points about, the data is like the gold standard, blah, blah, blah. It's incredibly valuable. The mortgage markets, residential real estate, it's just whatever, right? And MLS has all this wonderful data. So I did some extemporaneous add-ons to my presentation. So I got to say, it's like, I heard all this wonderful stuff about data, how valuable the data is, and just made me wonder, like, why are you all paying CoreLogic and Black Knight for software to put your data into their system? Like, shouldn't they be paying you? And then Troy goes, all right, great talk.
Yeah,
that's enough out of you.
Yeah, that got a huge audience laugh for sure, right?
So that was probably my favorite. I think my least favorite part, and this is not a reflection on you guys or any of the speakers or any of the people, I'm starting to feel like panel discussions are useless, at least in real estate, right? Or if we're going to have panel discussion, we need to change how we do it or something. Like, it needs to be panelists opining about some policy issue. Like, if we had a panel discussion on, let's say, CCP, right? Maybe that might have been useful because then you could have different people give their opinion about, well, here's what we should do, here's what we shouldn't do. But when it's a panel discussion, generally speaking, I feel like people just get disengaged.
Yeah, you're right, because we originally had thought of Chris and I talking and interviewing Ben Graboske, right?
Yeah.
But he and we ditched that and we said, no, Ben, you should do a talk. And Ben was great. He got audience participation. He showed these charts that really kind of added context to some of the discussions we were having. Yeah. And that, I think it's almost like you say, panels are tough to do.
Right.
But if you have a good speaker like Ben, who's got great, charts and things to think, and then he can get some interactivity with the audience.
Right.
Home run, dude.
Right.
Home run, yeah.
No, and he was great. But there was the one where people were talking about like various products, and I think you try to do it as like innovation panel or something, but it basically was like three companies talking about
that's right. Well, it was two MLSs and then one other company.
But those would have been much better as individual presentations.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
because it's not like you're going to have, Cole going, well, your product's a piece of shit. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why? Who needs that? Whereas on panel, you actually do want a little bit more of that.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, that's good feedback. I mean, I can tell you, I wanted to highlight innovators, like what Brad was doing, what Megan is doing with mandatory floor plans, and then and then kind of your traditional new vendor technology, right? I will say this, like I was talking about this with Dan Woolley this morning, right? And one of the ideas that I have, if we do this next year, and I hope.
What do you mean if? Of course you're going to do it. This is the best conference of the year. Of course you're going to do it again.
You keep saying that. It's like it's January 31st, right? So that's not such a high mark to hit. Hey, so is that there's so much interesting going on in the kind of MLS-led kind of technology experience, right? So like MLS is doing their own technology. And I've talked about this mostly, honestly, in a disparaging way. Like, why are you doing this MLS? Why don't you focus on this? But there is so much innovation actually being done. I'm thinking that this next year we could have MLSs. Now, it could be a tech or it could be a policy change like the mandatory floor plans, but do some sort of like I don't want to say pitch battle, but like have them come up one by one and then talk about what they're doing innovative-wise. And
why
then
not
maybe
a pitch battle?
And then Dan, and he can maybe get some brokers or agents to be judges. Yeah. And then at the end, kind of rate them, and we could have a prize for the MLS that's the most innovative, based upon their submissions or something. So
look, it's not my conference; it's your conference, obviously. But the way I look at it, I'm just kind of like, why not just give people 5 minutes?
Blueprint, it's good feedback. Yeah.
So Blueprint, which is really well done. You know how they have those little pods where companies come up and essentially present. It's a pitch. Everyone knows it's a pitch. But it's not mandatory, so you don't have to go to that pod if you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And people show up, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, I love, Alex Lang does that IOI summit for NAR, right? Yeah. And I went to that last year and had a great time. I love those things. They get him up. They do a great job. The production value he puts on is fantastic. So, no, I'm in. I know exactly
5 minutes
what you're
to pitch.
About.
And here's how I look at it. I'm like, hey, you want to pitch on the main stage? You want 5 minutes on main stage? It's $50,000.
No.
Why not? No, as long as you make it as long as you tell the audience, hey, this next presenter paid $50,000 in order to pitch you 5 minutes. So please give him 5 minutes.
I mean, we're not going to charge for that.
Why not, dude?
I think what you
capitalism. Want to do is, these are all businesses. None of them are charities. Capitalism, baby. Okay, all right. Anyway, all right. So moving on from that, there is a question I had for you because I tried so hard to listen, but maybe you heard some. What were Danae and Mitch talking about with their session?
Right.
I don't know what they said. I don't actually know. And I tried listening. I was like, something about MLS and foundations and like, what was that?
Yeah. So, again, I'm half paying attention and half trying to get what's going on in the room and stuff. So my understanding is, and again, this is very new. That's one thing they talked about. Like this is just very nascent. The first kind of green shoots are shooting up of this is that I think CMLS working with Mitch is working on their kind of own policy, MLS policy, separate from NAR.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know if it's really in a aggressive manner, but more as they see that reading the tea leaves of what may or may not happen. It's best that the organizations representing MLSs be prepared for that. That's and again, Danae or Mitch can write in the comments. Or later on we can talk about that. Yeah.
Right. Maybe we should have them on to explain because I'm like, now it makes sense because essentially they're trying to drop hints without actually saying it.
Well, again,
politically, it would be awkward for them to just come around and say, hey, everybody, we're going to do MLS policy.
Well, I think, again, they're just starting this out. I think they had a meeting the week before, and I think what they're kind of deciding is how far do they go with this, right? So I might be going so far as to insinuate or extrapolate from what they're saying of what they're trying to do. Yeah. But I think that is a bit of the general direction of what they're going. Yeah. But again, I'm not.
Okay, fine. Okay, we don't know what they're doing, so let's actually just talk about that. Should CMLS make MLS policy, or maybe put it differently, who should make MLS policy?
Right.
You're a consultant in this space now. Like, who would you recommend to your clients who should make MLS policy?
Right. So, I mean, I try to stay out of policy stuff. I'm more of a go-to-market, creative guy. But No, I mean, is it perfectly reasonable in a situation that we have right now, where there seems to be the federal government is looking at the tying between the National Association of Realtors and MLSs, and it has been the National Association of Realtors has really set MLS policy. Does it make sense for the MLSs themselves to say, well, if this gets too crazy, maybe we should be ready for this, and be ready a bit by drafting their own kind of policy. I don't think that's unheard of or I think that's smart, right? So whether they basically have to cut things off and like, or we're just going to do this now, that's a whole other subject. Right. But to be prepared, of course you should be prepared.
But I guess what made me wonder is, all right, if NAR is no longer in the picture, which I've suggested, right? I think NAR is irrelevant at this point. Why do MLSs need policy at all? Like, why do they have? In other words, why don't you just make whatever policy you want for your market? Why do you need to talk to another MLS?
Again, maybe I know that CMLS has done this in the past where they've issued best practices.
Sure.
Maybe this is more of a best practices kind of thing than a policy thing, or maybe at one point CMLS or something else becomes like, well, if you want to join CMLS, this is a doctrine. This is kind of the thing that we believe in, and we want to have some sort of like a fidelity with everybody, right?
Right. Because the thing
that level of fidelity, yeah.
The thing that I am concerned about for CMLS is, and I understand this is not the way they think about things. This is not. I totally get it. I totally understand. Like, you probably don't think of it this way, right? That no one really thinks in these terms. But the problem with NAR and the problem with MLS boards, the problem with association boards is that it's a group of competitors coming together, right? The concept of MLS has never been thought as a group of competitors coming together because the MLSs don't compete. However,
okay. I mean, I know of MLSs that compete for sure.
Other than Atlanta, who competes?
Let's say Claw and CRMLS.
Are they really competing? They're going after each other's members?
I mean, again, there's still two of them out there, right? And Annie believes, fervently in her and how she runs her MLS, and I know Art does too, right? So, are they
competing though?
Well, they're not. I mean, if there's two different entities there, right, and one is, they're, I don't know how many people in L.A. West Side, Beverly Hills are really on, CRMLS's system, right, and they're mostly on the Vesta system, right? So, I mean, I think that's competing. Do you think that Annie wishes Art would go away? Yes. Do you think Art wishes Annie would go away? Of course they would do. I mean, I don't know what you call that other than competing.
I mean, I don't like, how much marketing are they doing to brokers in each other's markets? Come join us.
Well, I mean, Art's been doing this. Has done this. I forget what the name of the campaign was, but they were doing a major campaign as far as I can't remember. It was like Join Us or something like that. But yeah, they've had campaigns for sure.
Then I guess that's cool. It's just my feeling. I don't think MLSs really compete with each other, right? Or have not. That's just not been a thing. And again, it's a vestige of the NAR world, because in NAR world, obviously, as a realtor associate, you get a territory. Right, like Phoenix Associate gets a territory, and then Scottsdale gets a territory, right?
Well, yeah, but I mean, MLS of Choice kind of blew that up, right? I mean, now everybody changes their name to, to something that isn't related to a territory because of MLS Choice. So I don't know.
I don't know what you mean by MLS Choice.
Well, remember MLS of Choice was like you didn't have to join. How do I put this? I mean, there was a lot of MLSs that changed their name because it used to be the Phoenix MLS,
right, and
then they became, the Southwest MLS, right? Because they wanted to expand their market, right? They all these different, instead of just the Austin MLS, it's Unlock MLS. It's like they don't want to appear that they're only limited to that geographical area, right?
Okay. I mean, but I don't really see it. Okay, fine. If you think MLSs are vicious competition,
well, I mean, I understand your sentiment.
If you think MLS are competitors, then it makes my point even more.
Hold on. I mean, I think there is that what you're thinking is something that one of our speakers talked about, Brian, right? Brian Boero.
That's why I'm bringing this up. Yeah. He said you need to compete more.
Yeah,
right?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my point was, like, CML, like, we don't have to used to think of MLS as competing, and MLS themselves don't think of them as competing. Brian gets on and says, hey, that was then, right? Post all these changes, you're great, but maybe you need to compete more, and therefore you need to do more marketing, right? Like, I mean, that's the general gist of his thing. And I'm sitting here like, yes, that's exactly right. And then it becomes an issue if CMLS starts promulgating policy, because they are a group of competitors. That's literally my point. So if you think that MLS already are competing with one another, then fine, it makes my point even stronger, right? Like, we've been burned so much by a group of competitors coming together that maybe we should look elsewhere. You know what I mean? Like, maybe everything has to be, to your point, it's not a mandatory policy, it's more like recommendations, best practices, consider doing this, right?
But aren't like other organizations like AMA or the bar or some other place? I mean, private practitioners of doctors compete against each other. Dentists compete against each other.
Sure.
Lawyers compete against each other, but they still belong to an organization that maybe you have to have some ethical policy to be a member of, right? So it's not unheard of.
No, it's not unheard of. I would distinguish the bar, the lawyers, because the bar is actually a governmental organization. Right.
Okay, well, I mean, maybe it's the National Association of Trial Attorneys, right?
Yeah, or something. Right, correct. Yeah. You know, so it's just something they're going to have to be super, super sensitive about. It's very different than NAR, where they would say, we have promulgated this policy, and now all MLSs must comply. Right.
Well, I think that's why Danae and Mitch were both on stage.
Right,
Mitch is an attorney, so I think, and again, the way that I remember them talking was, this is exploratory. This is a thing they have, and they've got a lot of work to do to see what is the best way of implementing this, right? So again, I think both you and I are making extrapolations of exactly what the fuck they're doing. I
agree, and I think I don't know who's going to do it, but I do think, and I think I wrote this in one of my posts. Maybe the best thing that CMLS could do is enabling the ILEC-CLEC thing, right? So this was something I wrote about out of the telecom world, right? ILEC is incumbent carrier, and CLEC is competitive carrier, right? Local exchange carrier. And the idea is incumbent MLSs must allow other startups or the MLS next door to compete against them, right? And the basis of that would be you have to share your data.
Right.
So data sharing doesn't become this protection racket. It becomes more like, cool, now that, like say Claw and CRMLS, now that everyone has the same data, right? Now let's go after it. Let's compete, based on price or service or tech or whatever.
Or policy.
Or whatever, right? I think that's probably the future. And I think some of the MLSs are ready for that challenge. That's my vibe. I have no like I wrote in my review, when you think about it, you look around that room, a lot of the MLS CEOs are in their 40s and 50s, right? Like none of them are thinking about retirement and their legacy, right? And I think those guys might be more open to, let's get it on.
Right.
Let's compete. Why not? Right.
Well, that they kind of addressed that in one of the other panels of just data sharing too, right? I mean, it seems like the data share stuff has just muted a lot of that kind of competition, right? Because
Correct.
Both of them have to, and maybe there's going to be some point where one MLS just says, nope, we're not. I mean, this is the exact opposite of what you're talking about, right?
Or,
so if you really want to compete,
right,
then you're really, how do you compete? It's depending on what, you're defining what they should compete on.
Right.
This almost comes into a CCP discussion, but,
right.
So you're saying, no, don't compete on data, compete in X, Y, and Z, right?
Right.
When, but then you got to say, well, if I can show my value of all the services and my customer service, my training, my everything else, well, they should come to me and they should put their listings in. Sure. And why should I give this other guy the fruits of my loins.
Right.
Because I did a great job, right? So I mean, there's it's very nebulous there, right?
It is nebulous. That's why I'm using the CLEC ILEC thing, because essentially Verizon. So there was a time, right, when Verizon phones did not talk to AT&T phones, if you remember, like way back in the day, and it was CDMA, TDMA, all this like technology thing. There was a time when if you were with whatever New England Bell or whatever it is, and you chose to go with a different phone provider, you couldn't take your phone number with you, right? So the disruption of having to call everybody and tell everyone new phone number, right? And some of these laws, some of these antitrust efforts came in, so no, you can't compete on that basis, right? So now we have competition, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, whatever, but all the phones talk to each other, right? Like I don't have to go. I can only call Greg because he's on Verizon with me, but I can't call Cole because he's on AT&T. Like that's no longer a thing, right? And that's, to me, that's where like RESO comes in real handy, right? The interoperability. But the next step really ought to be, so you could have a data sharing agreement, I think, if that data sharing agreement is not, how do I put this, not breachable, right? And the premise of the data sharing agreement is not, because today the way that MLS do data sharing is for agent convenience, right? It's so that my broker doesn't have to belong to two MLSs, right?
It's for broker convenience, yeah.
It's right. Yeah. But I'm sure there are terms where if you start messing with me, then I'm just going to cut off, I'm going to revoke the data licensing, right? If that's gone, so now it's like, oh yeah, no, we're going to share data with each other so that I can go pick up your members. And you can come get my members, right? If it went to that, then yeah, I think you would have really healthy competition.
Well, what's stopping somebody from starting their own MLS, bringing in some brokers because they are or whatever, and then once they say, hey, I've got these 5 brokers, let's do a data share. Right? I mean, so isn't what you're talking about available to do today?
Yeah, it goes beyond that, right? What I'm saying is, at this point, it's like some startup says, we're going to start offering MLS services in LA, right? Right. Okay, well, there are 2 existing MLSs, Claw and CRMLS. This random startup would have, as of right, have access to all the data out of Claw and CRMLS.
So the government would force them to share that data.
Government or CMLS, or we would do it ourselves or whatever, right? And I don't like the government. I hate the government because if the government gets involved, then they'll fuck it up.
Well, but this would have to be that kind of mandate, right? I mean, why would either one of those do that? I mean,
correct. That's the issue.
I mean, the way that the government, the way that it should work would be almost a free market. Yeah, start your startup.
Right.
Start showing the brokers that you have all this other cool shit.
Correct.
And then have them.
Right.
And then have them, brokers go to the other one. Hey, we're joining this MLS. Please do a data share, right?
But what I mean is, if it's a please do a data share.
Yeah. So okay, then the government. So
it
then
needs
the
to be more like,
come in.
I'm going over there. Send data. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Like I said, we could figure. All I'm saying is, I would rather not be the government, because if the government did it, then it'll get fucked up. Number one, and then they can't help but regulate.
Are CLEC and ELEC a government thing, or
they were originally? So I'm not the biggest fan of it. Yeah. And maybe that is the way. Maybe that is the way forward. And maybe it does have to be some level of government involvement, right? I mean, I'm not like. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be practical about it. But it was just like something I thought about, maybe as a step before that, before we get the government involved, is there a way for us as an industry, through a body like CMLS, to do something like that? That's basically what I'm wondering. Yeah. Right? Huh. And my sense is, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think right now, because I think these data shares were all, really stem from, and maybe somebody should do this, is like, I think it was either you or somebody that talked about the you've got 10 days statement, Craig Cheatham.
It wasn't me. Yeah, definitely wasn't me.
Might have been, I think it was Michael Wurzer.
I think it was Michael. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you kind of, and that was about, that the brokers were sick and tired of joining 94 MLSs or whatever the hell it was.
Right.
And I bet you if you put that point in time and then we we counted how many data shares were since that moment, I bet you that was a big catalyst for the amount of data shares. So these data shares have been really, I think, forced upon by the brokers, right? Who didn't want to be in some areas that, had to join 7, 8, 9, 10 MLSs to do that, right? So I bet if we did some math or not math, but just went back, that might have been the genesis of that, for sure.
It's entirely possible. So, I mean, I used to be a real opponent of data share because I've always felt like you're doing it so that you don't have to actually merge.
Right.
But maybe if we want more competition, this answer is not merger. The answer is data share as of right. So instead of it being CRMLS and Claw, right? It's more like 20 different MLSs in that market.
Right.
Right. And the broker and agent can pick and choose between 20 different choices and still get access to the same pool of data. Right. With like slightly different tools, slightly different levels of customer service. Maybe some MLS will be like, we're the white glove MLS, everybody. It's $500 a month, but we will have a driver come pick up your listing and enter it ourselves. Like, I don't know, like whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Whereas others will be like, we're the Walmart MLS. We provide you no tools. Like, have at it. Who knows? But I think that's the vision. But I don't know. Like, certainly the Realtor Association is not ready for that to happen.
There are pluses and minuses on both sides. That's for sure,
trade-offs,
right? Yeah. big trade-offs in either one of those things.
Right? Yeah. But speaking of Michael Wurzer, like, we never talked about this. Maybe we should have him on to talk about it. What's your take on Source MLS?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where he's coming from, right? Because where he's coming from is that if there is a world, and we've talked about this in the podcast before, I mean, if you combine commingling and the dissolution of CCP, it's basically, the seventh seal has been broken. And now, we're in a brand new world because at that point, now Zillow, and you can't blame Zillow or Homes.com. They're going to have to cut a deal with, let's just use Compass as an example, right? And because commingling is taken away, somebody can go to Zillow, see all the listings of the MLS and see Compass listings, but Compass didn't have to join the MLS because commingling is gone, right? And that's just in the spirit of IDX. That's not in the spirit of IDX of how this is supposed to work, right? So I think that in itself is a problem, right? So if you think, okay, maybe that's a world we live in, then there's nothing really. We have all these different freaking display rules for IDX. The brokerage has to be at a minimum font of this, and it has to be this close to the photo, whatever. But if the industry can unite on, a moniker, right, that says, okay, a brand. This is JD Powers,
right?
Just to use an old term, Gen X kind of term from there. I don't know if so Source MLS. I think. Back in the day, I don't know if you remember this, but I think there was another one called Trusted MLS, right? Or MLS Trusted. I think Trusted is actually a better.
I remember that.
Word.
Yeah.
Right.
Who was doing that one? Was that Victor?
I think it was Homes.com. Wasn't it?
I don't remember. I thought it was a consultant.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
so,
but anyway, all right. So basically,
then now a consumer can go, okay, these are coming from the MLS, and I can trust the MLS because they've done this. And like, okay, here's some randos in this feed. They're not part. Why aren't they on MLS? Why is and why don't they have days on market? Why don't they have other kind of things that they could be missing from things? But and it depends on who you talk to, because I've talked to two different a lot of people. Like, some people are saying, and I've heard on realtor commercials, they use the term MLS, right? And again, you and I are probably bad people, examples of this, but I do have some non-real estate friends. But, maybe I've talked about it too much. They know what an MLS is. I don't know with any certainty if the average consumer knows what multiple listings, MLS stands for, other than Major League Soccer, right? So there has to be a big kind of like, what does this mark mean, right? So I get where Michael's going. He's going, okay, if we're in a world where commingling exists, and that is whatever, we have to own something that will educate the consumer to say, this is the best that data can get. Where this is as transparent as get. This other thing is not.
Right.
right? So I think, I mean, it's a noble thing, but I mean, I think that's a lot of money. That's a lot of.
It's a lot of money, and you have, so what Michael needs to then solve is a core critical problem, right? And I put it as a problem, not a challenge or issue. The problem is every single MLS that I know, every single one, and you could go on Zillow right now and check by going to the data sources thing. Every single MLS says all information deemed reliable but not guaranteed.
Right.
You can't have that and this Source MLS concept of this is the accurate gold standard. Because if your underlying product is literally saying, we're not telling you this is accurate. Right? And there's all those disclaimers like deemed reliable, not accurate.
Yeah,
Buyer's supposed to verify, blah, blah, blah. If you got to do that, then it doesn't mean anything.
I think, again, it's a brand. I mean, I think
it's a branding play. No, I get it.
It's a branding play, and I think that kind of stuff is just noise. I mean, it's just like listening to goddamn when you're watching the Sunday morning talk shows and like all the pharma stuff comes on. You know, hey, it's great. It's a wonderful world. The sun's out, but you could take this and kill yourself. Right? And don't take this when you're pregnant, right? And you know, so it's like everybody's kind of used to that. That's just jargon you have to put in there, right? So I don't know if it's a deal breaker. I mean, we're all used to having jargon like that everywhere we're looking, right? So okay. It's a pure branding play to me.
Oh, I guess what I was thinking was, why wouldn't this MLS Source MLS thing just indemnify? Go buy insurance, you know, and say, hey, if there's a data inaccuracy, we'll cover it.
That could be a play. That could be a play.
I think if you did something like that, then Source MLS, like, I could trust that's accurate.
Yeah, that's a total play right there for sure, right?
Right.
I mean,
maybe that's the way.
Maybe
yeah. Otherwise, it feels like
it's like you know, think about title insurance, right? It's like I always talk about what a scam that is because you know they have 0.000003 whatever.
Right.
I mean, if you kind of get the same underwriters,
right? There we go. Here it is. We just solved it, right? Source MLS should be provided by title companies as a form of title insurance.
Well, it wouldn't be title. I mean, maybe
it's data accuracy insurance.
Title companies would be an insurance provider for that, maybe, right?
But,
it's kind of the same ballpark.
So
right?
to join Source MLS, you got to pay some fee per listing, right?
Well, I think if the industry gets together, maybe that'll be. I mean, but you know, again, this is America, right? So would Compass right away? Okay, we're going to guarantee, you know, get their own
Source
policy
MLS,
also. No policy that they could also say are, you know, we're also this. Right. It's, you know, it is a branding play, pure and simple, though, right?
Reminds me a little of the
best branding?
Fair Trade Certified, you know, or the Certified Organic, a little bit like that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting. I mean, they wanted to make
it's green. It's green. They're green listing.
That's right. It reminds me a little bit of the original time. I think Michael or somebody mentioned it was a little bit of the Intel Inside campaign.
Right, for sure.
Back in the day, right?
Yeah, no, it is. Shades of that for sure, right? Yeah, but you want a certified fresh, right? I mean, you want that kind of vibe to it. I mean, hopefully we don't get there, but I mean, you know, you never know.
I don't know. All right, cool. I mean, those were my major takeaways. Other than like, it was so good.
And I'll give you. I'll answer your question again that you asked me in the beginning. What was my least favorite, right? And I tell you, it sometimes. It is kind of the industry update, you know, and that's where I basically tell jokes about people in the industry, right? Because
I think you could stop apologizing and like preface it. And we all know, like, nobody thinks you're actually like hating anybody. I think you could just say these are jokes one time.
I always say that. I know, but I still at the end of the day, it's like, oh God, I hope fucking Matt hates me or. This other guy, you know, is like, you know, whatever. But I mean, they're all very good sports. I have to say that. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Nobody thinks you're being hateful. Nobody thinks you're actually like, you know, doing anything like that. It was funny.
Oh, there's some Robertson voodoo dolls out there. I guarantee it.
You know, people are that fucking thin-skinned and sensitive should just fucking quit, go sit in their bedrooms and just like, you know, rub themselves to comfort. Like, you're in the fucking real world.
I will tell you this time.
Shit. Like, who cares?
I will tell you, every time I do this, I would say over half I get from other people.
Yeah.
and like one of the ones I got this time was the joke was basically that Netflix is announcing a new reality series, and it was awesome. based on MLS executives, right?
So is that a real movie, or is that like
no? So
was that like
I'll give her credit. Frances Wiseman, who was my director of marketing over at WNR Studios, she did this AI thing of a movie poster, and she says, "Do me a movie poster that the title of the movie is Mandatory Submission." And it
was hilarious. That was great.
The poster was so spot on, and like so she gave me the poster. And then I'm like, oh, this is so good. How do I? So I came up with with the setup and the joke.
Yeah.
But the poster was from her mind there. But it's like it is interesting. Like the terms we use in this business, like it's coming soon, mandatory submission. You can go on and on. Like what you can kind of talk about, right?
Yeah. No. Oh man, that's hilarious. This industry, so many great people.
And again, thank you for joining us. I mean, it was
my pleasure.
Controversial and entertaining. I mean, I don't know how you do it. You just got up there, no notes, just started talking, and I don't have that.
Well, I did have slides.
Yeah, but still, you were fantastic.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. I'll tell you what. Actually, one of my big was. I'm used to there being a lot more pushback. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like I say, typically when I give a presentation, my goal is having half the room nodding along and the other half like just utterly horrified. Right. This time I didn't and I think it was summed up by Amy Gorse, right? Who got up at the beginning of one of it. There's like, the older I get, more I find myself agreeing with Rob, which is disturbing.
Well, okay. I think there's a bit of that, but I'll also say this is like, it wasn't like you were picking on one particular group.
No.
You fought, shots were fired at everybody in that audience, right? So I don't, and when you do something like that, it's like, okay, all right, this is hyperbolic, this is whatever, and we're going to take this as like, as we do on this podcast, where you bring it to the edge to open up our minds like, well, that's not what we're talking about. Well, and you're saying, no, it could be because aren't you saying A, B, and C? I'm like, well, yeah, well, this could happen. Okay. And then we reel it back. Right. So I think they're taking it. Maybe they're getting better at understanding your shtick. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. Maybe. I just thought it was remarkable. And then the other thing, and again, I wrote about this, fact that you have, you and Chris and Amy, and all of you guys are like about as expert and about as mainstream. You know what I mean? Like, fine, Rob's kind of out there on the edge.
Yeah.
Right. But nobody's like Chris Benner's on the edge. Nobody's like Amy Gorse's. Boy, she's a controversial figure.
Right.
When I asked about governance, and Amy says you should not have more than 5 directors, and you should meet once a quarter. I'm like, holy crap, right? Because that's what I've been like talking about for 10 years, right? And now it's starting to filter in. So I'm like,
you know why? Because I think she's relatively new to this consulting thing, right?
But she was an association exec before.
Yeah,
she talked about that, right?
Yeah.
I quit because I couldn't do what I needed. I couldn't be nimble.
No,
right?
But I mean, I've only done this a few of these strap plan stuff, and like already, it's like, you need less people in this room, right?
No doubt.
That happens, right? I mean, it's tough. And then you think of the size of NAR shit, dude, crazy.
It's bigger than Congress.
Yeah, crazy.
But I think that's going to be a really interesting thing to look at over this year and maybe next year. It's like I said, man, I really got this vibe that the MLS execs in the room are like, hell yeah. Just get the board off my back.
Yeah.
So
and she had a good, talking about the difference between stakeholders and shareholders, right?
Right.
So, there was these are things we all talk about, but, and the tough part is bringing that thing up and getting your board to that type of situation.
It's a resume generating event. So here's how I look at it. I think if you're going to do that as a CEO, like get your resume out there first. That's
brutal, dude.
No, seriously. But here's the thing. I don't think they should be so terrified. Like some of these men and women are like really accomplished. Like they know what they're doing, right? And if they can't get it, like fine, then move on because that organization is fucking dead anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
You get a job somewhere else. Like, you're capable people.
They're not, falling off of trees, these jobs, either, right? I mean,
yeah,
especially
but there are other jobs that are, that will be... I'm just, like, that's just how I genuinely feel. But how do you bring it up? I think you go to your board and say, we need to reform governance.
Right.
You're making it impossible for me to do my job. We need to reform governance.
Okay, well... I hate, hate to lose you.
Right, exactly. And then you go, all right, well, see you later. Good luck to you, right?
Right.
When you guys are fucking dead in the water because shit's going to pop up and you're going to take 6 months to make a decision.
At least,
right. Yeah. So you're never going to be ready for any crisis. You're never going to be advancing. You're never going to do anything because you're going to be busy spending all your time in committee meetings, right? Then if you're the CEO, why do you want to be on top of that? Like, life is too short. Go do innovative things. Go try things. And I did love the fact that, like Bob Hale said, look, you got to take risks.
Yeah.
You're going to win some, you're going to lose some, but your members are going to appreciate that you're trying, right? And if the board's not going to let you do that, then you got to confront the board. Maybe go to the member. I don't know what you do, right?
Yeah.
And I get how difficult and how risky that is, but that's just my feeling. Like, hey, man, some of the people we have are really smart. They know what they're doing. There'll be other opportunities that come along.
No, and hopefully they would, try and it was really great to talk to Bob. I mean, and get his perspective. I mean, he talked about his biggest failure was that agent match program, and they, and he tried it. They took it back, and then they figured out a better way of rolling out later on, and got to there, right? Yeah. I hope, it was just to talk about Bob real quick is that I was glad we were the first one to give him a kind of a tribute talk. Yeah. Because there's got to be more coming this year, right?
Of course.
So, but that was great to hear from him.
The farewell tour is going to be
magnificent. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I did really appreciate that. I do want to point one thing out. I do want to say this. The other reason for hope is I know some of the people in the audience were volunteer leadership. The chair of the board, the president, whatever, right? And I didn't get the vibe from them, like, go to hell. What do you mean change governance, right? I think what I'm going to do more of going forward is just give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, they're not just on the board because they're on some power trip, right? Or because they're corrupt motherfuckers, exist.
Yeah.
Let's be fucking real about this. Las Vegas, San Diego, it exists. I'm going to say that the vast majority of them actually just want to do the right thing. That they actually are doing this because they care about the MLS, they care about the membership, they care, and what they want is the best possible organization. Cool. If the message is being delivered, not just by their CEO, but by people like you and Amy and Chris, like, you need to reform your governance. You are strangling your organization, right? I think they would actually be open to it. I don't think it's going to be this hostile. I don't think it's going to be, okay, well, see ya, we're really going to miss you. I think it might be, let's talk about that, right? And it's going to be a lot of work. I get it, but I think their heart might be in the right place. We should give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I wish, and maybe, not, and it doesn't have to be, MLS Reset or anything, but, for them to be in a room like that and hear you talk, hear Michael talk, hear all these other people talk about these things, maybe that's a way, right, of doing things, right, of educating, giving them the larger picture. And that's, when I told you before, when I do the strat plan stuff, is that I try to make it entertaining. I call it Murder on the Citrus Express, right, where I do kind of here's what's going on, and educate their board on, like, these are larger issues because they're just hearing what their broker told them, right? And they don't understand in context of what's going on. And then when their eyes are open, maybe they can make those better decisions, right? So I mean, yeah, for sure.
And look, maybe that's maybe some of them are going to we know they listen to this podcast.
No, I've told you, I've gone to these things, and it's like, on the forum stuff, there was, I forget which state it was, but they says, you know what, I just listened to you and Rob, and I called said we can't do this on a state level. We have to come up with a different way because of the things we talked about. So I know, there's a bit of that happening too. So that's good. So,
hey man, we're one small change at a time. We're making positive contributions. That makes me feel fucking great about it. I will put this out there. Like, if you guys are actually in the volunteer leadership roles and you want to talk a little bit more about governance, like, maybe we'll have you on a show. Maybe we'll do a live, thing. I mean, this is a passion of mine. I've been working on it my entire effing career. Is like, how do we change governance to liberate the MLS? I know you're now in that game,
For sure.
I'd be open to doing that. So let us know if you're interested in something like that.
And before we wrap, I mean, we should talk about next week, right?
Yes. It's a live stream.
Maybe I'll be caught up by sleep by then.
All right. So it will be, let's remind everyone at the time, I believe we're going to do 10 a.m.
That's right. And I'll have a post about it on Vendor Alley.
Yep. We'll tweet about it, all that.
And everything else. Yeah, for sure.
But frankly, like, you listeners are the ones that really, should know. So 10 a.m. Pacific, next Friday, the 7th.
Live.
We're going to do live. We're going to do live streams. And that means, I guess we might have a topic or two to talk about, but hopefully it's more of a conversation with audience members. So looking forward to seeing all of you there. All right. Greg, thanks again as always. Wonderful show. Congratulations once again. And
thank you, man.
Yep. Thanks everyone for listening to us. Yeah. All right. Bye everyone.